thinking and talking about, let's cover college planning, 529s, UTMAs, gifting rules, things like that, with the idea to inform everyone of how they can best save for college or help their grandkids or kids out funding different goals that they may have in life.
Awesome. That sounds like a nice itinerary to do. We should first get you a little bit of an introduction.
So I've been here 7 years, now a wealth advisor, and part of our advanced planning team. So I've been enjoying that a lot.
Yeah, so you're working directly with clients as an advisor, as well as supporting other clients with kind of maybe more specific needs.
Correct. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, cool. This is I think you're just the guy to dig into this with. Maybe start out just by defining what is a 529, or what does that number mean?
They were initially set up for college savings. Through different changes in laws, they now can be savings for private school, trade school. You can now even use them to repay student loans. So they've evolved since their creation, but mainly they are meant for college or secondary savings.
I've seen, are these available in brokerage accounts? I've also seen like state 529s. Is there a difference between any of that?
Yeah, they are separate from a brokerage account, so they are their own investment account. So you have to open up a separate 529 account. 529s are all sponsored by different states. So Minnesota has their own 529 plan, Utah has their own, Kansas has their own. And there are some reasons why you may want to open a Minnesota one or another state one, depending on your state rules. And so they are sponsored by all states. Every state has their own 529 plan. Because you live in Minnesota or any other state, you can open a state-funded 529 from any state. And a lot of people will look and say, I like the investment options in this state, I'm going to open a one in Kansas, or I like one for Virginia. So you have the options to open a 529 through any state program, but depending on your state income tax deductions and reason, they may tilt you towards a specific state.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so this is something that you can contribute to, right? So a parent could set up a 529, a grandparent on behalf of a child or a grandchild, right?
Correct, yes. A parent can set it up, a grandparent can set it up, aunt, uncle, friends, anybody can set them up. They are for the benefit of an individual. And then anybody can contribute to that. There are easy ways to do it, whether you just want to, on the holidays or birthdays, give a check and say, here, put this in their 529, or there's a way to do it electronically through, I think it's called Plan. I could double check that, where you can get a code and just ACH directly from your bank account into a 529 plan.
That makes a great gift for sending around at, like you say, at the holidays.
Yeah, it seems like kids have too many toys already and clothes and things like that, so it's a good alternative to those things. It doesn't look flashy. The kids don't enjoy unwrapping a check on their birthday, but I think 18 years down the road, when they're trying to go to school and they have a majority of it paid for already through a 529 or another vehicle, it's a nice gift to have.
So let's set the table here with the cost of college. You ran some numbers earlier, and you said, here's what it is today, but then we kind of fast forward to maybe 18 years in the future. What are those numbers looking like? Maybe a state college start with.
Yeah, just an average of public in-state schools is probably going to cost you today about $27,000 a year. Assuming about a 4% inflation rate on that cost, 18 years down the road, that could cost you around $58,000.
And that's per year, so if you go to a 4-year college,
you're looking at about $235,000, $230,000.
A cool $250,000.
Yes.
All right, and then some for books and whatnot.
That does include the cost of tuition, books, room and board, all of that.
Oh, okay.
So that's an all-in cost of $27,000.
Okay, so we can kind of have that number
I should have
in
prefaced
mind.
that with the cost, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, maybe we don't need to run that number, but an Ivy League school, considerably more.
Correct, yeah. I mean, the numbers for an average private school 4 years there right now is about $58,000 per year.
Yeah.
Inflate that at the same 4% rate, and now you're at about $130,000 a year. So $500,000 for a private school over a 4-year program.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Well, so I think we've identified that there's a need to set some money aside. We'd like to see it grow, and over 18 years, there is an opportunity for that growth.
Correct.
Do you have a number in mind when you're running these scenarios?
Yeah, really depend. I mean, it depends on a lot of factors. Some individuals want to cover the entire college, or they want to, if it's a grandparent, some of them just want to say, I want to cover half of it, or a semester, or 1 year. And so it really depends on what the goal is. And so what we can do is say, okay, if you're thinking, let's just say we all live in Minnesota, the U of M's a big institution, we want to plan for going to the U. And how much of that do you want to cover?
Right.
And so we back in and say, okay, I want to cover one semester. It's expected to now be $50,000 or half that $25,000 because it's a semester. Mm-hmm. How do we get there? And then we could say, if you do it on an annual basis, it should be X number of dollars. If you want to do it in a lump sum, it would be this in 1 year. And so we can figure out all those numbers. But first, we got to determine the goal and how we want to get there. And it varies by household, by if grandparents are giving it, if parents are giving it. But we can figure it out once we know the end goal.
Mm-hmm. Let's run through an example of kind of a monthly savings goal. This might be for young parents or even grandparents setting something aside.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of run that scenario. Let's say it's $100 a month.
Yeah, if you put $100 a month, so you can fund a 529 plan once the child has a Social Security number. 3 months after birth, if you started putting $100 a month into that account for 18 years, if you assume 6% growth rate on that money, that $100 a month turns into about $38,000 at age of 18. Mm-hmm. So that's a nice, that covers almost 1 year of college based on the inflation we're using. So that's a great place to start. I think $100 a month for a lot of people is very reasonable. And then as life goes, you make more income, careers go on, or grandparents, if your plan looks great and you have more money to gift, you can certainly change that, and it would change the dynamics.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the $100 a month is just kind of for this scenario or this example.
Correct.
But maybe over 18 years, you might expect that 100 to become 120, 150, 200 as time goes on.
Correct. Yep, and it doesn't factor in those gifts like Christmas. Mm-hmm. Maybe someone gives you $250. It all adds up and will grow. But this scenario is a very basic scenario that would get you at least basically about a year.
Let's talk through some of the gifting limits. And so is there a limit specifically for 529? I know you've talked a little bit about gifting broadly. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of a number for that. Is there a specific number for a 529?
The 529 number is the same as the annual gift exemption that everybody has, which in 2024 is $18,000 per person. So into the 529, because it's for a grandchild or a child, you can give them $18,000. If you're married, each spouse can give that person $18,000. So grandma and grandpa, mom and dad can give $36,000 into that 529 account in 24, and again repeat that every single year without having gift tax issues or having to file a gift tax return.
So maybe a slight tangent here. If the parents are giving them $8,000 for their 529 and $10,000 for some other gift, mm-hmm. that whole gift is 18.
Correct. Yep.
Right. So however you want to slice it and sort of set some aside.
That is correct. Yeah. If you're a parent and you're living with your kid, giving them money to go buy a toy and things like that, that's not getting added. Sure. Getting into the weeds on how to get so cute, but exactly. If you gift your kids a $10,000 car, you can only put $8,000 into the 529.
Yeah, okay, that makes good sense. I guess the next thing I wanted to move into with that, you had talked about kind of a 5-year prepayment. Maybe walk through that scenario.
Yeah, so with the nice thing about the 529 plans is they do follow that $18,000 a year exclusion or amount that you can gift. But what they do allow is that you can do up to 5 years of that, so 18 times 5 or $90,000 into the 529 plans in 1 year. You can super fund it. So child is born and you want to give a nice gift to the kid or grandkid, you can put $90,000 in for them and then let it grow and compound for 18 years. After that, after 5 years go by, you can start to fund it again with annual or another 5-year gift.
Yeah, that lump sum could be nice just to have the money in the market for that additional 5 years rather than sort of averaging in, right?
Correct, yep.
Maybe we didn't necessarily touch on this, but there's a tax advantage here. to 529s, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple tax advantages. The first one is you put the money into the 529 plan and it grows and compounds for 18 years or however many years you have the 529 plan open. As long as it's used for qualified expenses towards education, that is not taxable to you. So you can take out all the earnings and everything and not pay any tax if used for qualified education expenses. And there's a long list of those, and majority of what you'd expect would be covered. So books, tuition, room and board, all of that would be covered. And so that's the great thing about this is you have this money growing and compounding, and then you don't have to pay tax on it.
So you talked about, I guess our example was the U of M here in Minnesota, state school. Could it also be applied to a technical school, a 2-year, or maybe a mechanic, HVAC, something else? Maybe talk through that.
Yeah, it absolutely can go towards those types of programs. It can also go towards private school, and it can also, like I said, go towards student loan repayment. If you do go to a trade school, you're maybe not reading books like you would be in a normal university, and so if you buy tools and things like that, that would be covered by the 529 plan because that is essential to you getting that degree. So that's a really nice benefit. Private school, you can use up to $10,000 a year from the 529 plan to go towards private school tuition and save for student loan repayment. A lot of times if you have a 529, you don't have student loans, but then it also depends on the plan for the 529. There's a lot of different things that can change as life goes on. Some siblings may get a scholarship and you may not use it all, and so you may have loans out for one child and then can then use the 529 from the other child, transfer into their 529 to pay back off their loan. So there's a lot of different strategies. I mean, there's a lot of strategies where we can keep this money in the 529 so that you don't have to pay that tax on it.
Maybe it goes without saying, but the a study abroad program, that would also be in this if it's offered through the university.
Correct. As long as it's part of the university and their tuition and build, that would be covered by them as well. Now, the airfare to get over there is not a qualified expense.
Okay.
So some people who have children who are out of state, can their flights be covered because how else do they get to school? That is one expense that is not covered. And so there's little nuances to it, but a majority of the common sense type things that go towards school would be covered.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You talked about how a 529 could be sort of kept in a certain form, and I think of it as a container. I've read that 529s can be converted to a Roth, I believe. Is that right? Is that a new law?
Yeah, it will. As of the end of 2022, when they passed the Secure Act 2.0, they came up with the idea that you can now, any money left in a 529 after the child is in school can then be rolled into a Roth IRA. And so the law passed in 22, it was effective starting in 2024. So we are here now. You can now start to make those rollovers from the 529 plan into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. So that would be the child or grandchild. There are some rules around that, so you can only move the Roth contribution limit each year. So that year, right now, it's at $7,000 per person. So you can move $7,000 this year, next year, and so on and so forth. The max amount that you can move into the Roth is $35,000. So it's a 5-year kind of rollover strategy that you can implement. They have to have at least that amount of money made in income. So those kind of Roth rules where you at least have to have that income in order to be able to make those rollovers. The one thing that we're waiting for with that, so it's great, you can do it now, it's 2024, but some of the states have not changed their tax laws yet to be current with the rules. So we're saying you can do it this year, but let's pump the brakes a little bit and wait until the state of Minnesota or whatever state you live in have officially updated their tax code, which a majority are going to. They just haven't done it yet. And that's to prevent you paying state tax on those distributions. But once the states get caught up, you can roll it over, and it's $35K. You get into a Roth IRA then that you never have to pay tax on. And is a great starting retirement tool now for the kids. So you cover their education expense, you had some leftover money, and now you can help fund them a Roth IRA. And I mean, you're doing a great job as a grandparent or parent helping set your kid up for success, which is really what we want.
In today's terms, a Roth IRA can be utilized or sort of withdrawn from? Is there a certain age for that? Is that 50 or 60, 65?
You can withdraw from a Roth IRA without any penalties once you're 59 and a half. And we usually recommend not touching it until then. The Roth does have, it allows you, if used for your first home purchase, to avoid paying the penalty on gains. You can always take your principal out of a Roth without having any penalty or tax owed. So are some strategies with the Roth, but it really is a great vehicle that you should leave for retirement because it'll grow and compound again until age 59 and a half. And then at that point, it's tax-free. And even if you leave it until age 75, which is the magical required minimum distribution age for IRAs and 401ks, the Roth doesn't have that. So you're never required to take the money out.
Wow.
So you turn this great tax-advantaged account like a 529 plan into a Roth IRA that could then grow until age 60. I mean, it's just great.
Yeah. Yeah, you got 40 plus years of compound growth that is just a nice thing to leave, a nice legacy for that child.
Correct, yeah. There are some rules to qualify for rolling into a Roth IRA. You have to at least have the 529 account open for 15 years to qualify. There are a few other ones, but that's a big one, so it's not like you can open up a 529 account for your grand who's 17 right now and hope to get them some Roth in the next couple of years. You do have to start early with the 529 plan, and it doesn't have to be funded a lot. If your plan is, I want to kind of set this up mainly for Roth and not for the education aspect, you can just open it, fund it a little bit. They can cover some education expenses and then be used for Roth. There's plenty of different strategies that you could talk to your advisor about and see what their thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that's the for me, that's one of the takeaways is with all of the sort of variation and the Secure Act coming through, and still kind of figuring out that on a state-by-state level, the myriad of examples you've given is how it could be used and sort of, there's a lot to it, a lot to unpack, and just to kind of understand levers to pull, as we say.
Yep, plenty of levers to pull with this. And one, going back to your other question about tax, the tax favorableness, also some states offer deductions or credits or subtractions on your state income tax return for the donations that you do make to the 529 plan.
Good point.
So Minnesota does not care where you open your plan. So going back to it, you could open your Alaska 529 plan, you live in the state of Minnesota, you could still get a deduction, credit, or subtraction on your tax return. Other states like Illinois or Colorado will only give you a state income tax deduction, credit, subtraction if you open their state plan. So it's a way to entice you to go into their state plan, but sometimes the benefit is really good. And so that's also something that we are aware of, that each state is different, and that if you live in a different state, we can help make sure you set up the right 529 plan at the right place.
Yeah, so there's some evaluation, a little bit of criteria, and then just talking with those families to kind of pick the best one.
Correct, yep.
Speaking of picking the best one, within this account that's set up, do I as a parent or a grandparent, do we have to pick stocks, or is there a fund, or is it you put money in and what happens to it?
Exactly, and a lot of them you can choose, it's mutual funds, or a lot of them come up with these age-based programs that you can enroll in where they do the management for you. And so the age-based means at the age of 1, they can be a lot more aggressive than once they get closer to school because they have time for that to ebb and flow. And so it'll be, if you choose the age-based, it'll be invested more aggressively, probably 100% in equity or pretty close. And then as they get older, that allocation automatically starts to change to get less risky. And then by the time they're college age, it could be 10% in stock, 0% in stock, so things like that. And so that's really nice. So it's pretty much you can set it and forget it. And as long as you're making contributions and happy with the allocation, you can let that roll. Other ones, you can pick the mutual funds that you want. There aren't any that offer they don't treat it like a brokerage account. So a lot of them are set with, here are your mutual funds you have to choose, or I don't even know if any of them offer ETFs, but mainly mutual funds, low cost.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then it can just accept, that $100 per month and put that towards that fund. Well, okay, so this has been a nice deep dive on the 529s. Are there any other kind of programs, platforms, tax treatments that we should be aware of when thinking about gifts and savings for education?
Yeah, so great transition, because one of the things that some people don't like about 529s is, one, it has to go towards education. Who knows what's going to happen. Maybe your kid gets a full ride scholarship. Maybe they don't even go to school. That's where the Roths, being able to roll over to Roth's a great thing. But the other option that some people use is what's called an UTMA. It stands for Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. So this is an account. It's basically a brokerage account for the benefit of the child or grandchild. And so being a brokerage account, you can buy mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, bonds, whatever you want in that account. And as long as it's used for that child's benefit, it's eligible to be open. And so some people like the idea of, I can't buy Apple, Amazon, some of these Magnificent Seven or these tech companies or these ones that should really grow in a 529 account, but I want my kids, I want to do that. I want them to have that so they can open an UTMA account. The UTMA account gives you no tax benefits, so it's not tax sheltered. You have to pay interest, taxes on interest, dividends, capital gains in that account on an annual basis. But it does give you ultimate flexibility. You can control that. If your kid wants to use money to buy a car, it's a great account. They could say, I'm going to use my UTMA to buy a car. You can use it for education expenses, but no benefits for it. Or they could use it for their first home. It's a great tool for that. The one thing to be aware of is an UTMA account does become the child's account at their age of 21, if you're in the state of Minnesota. And so at 21, you may have saved all this money and you had this great plan for it, but at 21, it becomes the kid's money, and then the kids do what they want with it. So maybe the kid takes it and buys a car, but really you wanted them to buy a house with it. Well, at that point, you lost control of it. So either being careful with how much is funded in that account, or making sure that you and the child or grandchild are on the same page is really important with those types of accounts. There are the same gift limits apply, so $18,000 per year into that account. The other thing that is great about those accounts is parents or grandparents can transfer stock into that account. So it's a way for that parent, maybe you have a stock that is appreciated, a very large unrealized gain. You don't want to pay the taxes on that, and you also want it to grow. You could transfer that into the kids' account, and then they get to benefit. They have those shares, and it grows and grows and grows, and then they would be the ones that have to pay the tax. I've never seen a kid or grandchild complain about paying tax on a very nice stock gift that they got from their parents, but that's another strategy that can be utilized with the UTMA that can't be utilized with the 529.
Just thinking through that scenario a little bit, so if I had an appreciated stock and it was valued at $18,000, I transfer that stock over, is that my gift limit?
That would be your gift, correct.
Okay, so if it be it cash or kind of an in-kind or stock, there's still that limit.
Yep.
And maybe another scenario would be you could do half of your $18,000 into a 529, the other half into a UTMA account.
Correct. Yeah.
Do people do that? Is there reasons to kind of do a bit of both, or do people kind of go one direction and that's the strategy?
It depends.
Good answer. Sure.
It really depends. I see all things. Okay. I think people I'd say majority are all in on the 529, especially now with the Roth changes, because the limits, they can still build for their grandchild or child's retirement or help them out with that. But I have seen it done where they do both. I want them to have money set aside for school, but I also want them to have some money set aside that's either some people like to trade stocks with their kids and they work on that little account with them. Others like it because I want them to buy their first car with this money or first home with this money, and this money's for education. So I've seen it all different ways. I would say a majority usually go one way or the other, but I do see both from time to time. The other thing, one last thing with the $18,000, a lot of times it's easy to get that up to $36,000 because a lot of people gift split. A lot of times there's grandma and grandpa or mom and dad who are allowed to each give $18,000 to the beneficiary. So a lot of times we can get up to about 36 now.
With tapping your kind of family, friends, uncles,
just tapping a
cousins.
Married couple, each can give $18,000. But then if you tap to the next stage, and grandma and grandpa can give $18,000 each to the beneficiary, and so you can really build these up with different gifts. So the limit's 18 per person, but we can, in talking through different plans and goals, we can easily find a way to get that increased.
Yeah, and I think earlier you had talked about compound growth being the eighth wonder. I think that's an Einstein quote or attributed to him. It seems like if a person can start early, that there's some advantage to that, just having that potential, that opportunity for growth.
Correct. Yeah. Starting early with these types of accounts is the best thing you can do. One, because you need to have a 529 open at least 15 years to be able to roll over for the Roth. But two, like you said, the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest. And for someone who's 1 year old or whatever, they have a long time horizon, which means they can be invested more aggressively. And historically, those returns are more predictable over long periods of time and tend to be positive. And so it just really helps those kids out with the college costs or the gifts that you're giving for a car or home or whatever, getting them established with trading stocks at a young age, things like that. There's a lot of fun things that can be done with these types of accounts.
Yeah, this is exciting and inspiring. I think people will find this conversation pretty useful for thinking through those kind of scenarios. Is there anything else people should know? Certainly to contact you or contact Vector.
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about 529s or UTMAs or talking about strategies, touch base with your advanced planner or your advisor and say, I want to make sure we work this into our next meeting, or let's schedule a call and talk about this now. I think that's the next step that would be done. Everybody, I think we have a lot of unique strategies for people that can really find a way to maximize and accomplish whatever goal you have set. And a lot of times in client meetings, we talk about the beneficiary balance and does your plan work and what does the beneficiary balance look like? And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to leave that amount of money to my kids or grandkids. And so giving to them and using that beneficiary balance and giving now to college, to the 529s, to the UTMAs, it's a great way for that balance to go down and you to experience and watch these grandkids or kids enjoy these things while you're alive. And so it's a way for you so we come up with really cool strategies for people who don't want to leave that much money to their kids or grandkids, to watch them use it now and enjoy that while you're still living, because life's too short. So
yeah, that's a great point. Well, thanks again for coming on in and recording
thanks for having me.
Yeah, so much great information. Like Chris said, just contact Vector or reach out to Chris directly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks again.
Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies.